Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers, sisters, and friends, may the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. In this video, what I want to do is discuss Sam Harris's moral landscape. Now, what is the moral landscape? The moral landscape is basically an attempt by Sam Harris to propose a model to validate objective moral values in the absence of God. Right? What he suggests is that there are peaks and there are troughs. The peaks represent human flourishing. Anything that leads to human flourishing is good. And anything that leads to human misery or suffering is evil. And these are the troughs or the valleys in his landscape, right? Now, why does Sam Harris do this? Why is he taking this position that he wants to validate objective moral values in the absence of God? It's very interesting. I mean, let me just give you the argument first. The point is this, right? That in the absence of God, you have no claim to objective moral values and truth. All you have to fall back on is evolution or social pressure. Either one of these two render morality subjective or relative at best. Right? I mean, the eminent philosopher of science, Michael Roos, clearly states this when he says, ethics are illusory. I appreciate that when someone says, love thy neighbor as thyself, they think they are referring above and beyond themselves. Nevertheless, such reference is truly without foundation. Morality is just an aid to survival and reproduction, and any other deeper meaning is illusory. Basically, and this is the fact. The fact is, in the absence of God, you have no claim to objective moral values and truth. Now, why does Sam Harris want to validate objective moral values in the absence of God? Well, the simple reason is because atheists like Harris love to pass moral judgments, love to say this is bad and this is evil and this is wrong. But at the same time, he realizes that he cannot validate his claims. I mean, they're just empty. They're subjective opinions, basically, and they hold no weight. They mean nothing, really. So he wants to validate objective moral values. So when he says something, it means something, right? And another thing is that some atheists, they just can't, they don't know what right is and what wrong is. I mean, just have a look at this clip for a second.
Why is incest wrong?
It's not clear to me that it's wrong.
And this is the point. See, people like Lawrence Krauss or Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris, they're clueless and when it comes to moral right and wrong. So Harris, I guess, realizes this and he wants to provide something to substantiate moral values. Now, let's look at his argument, right? Let's just quickly, briefly look at it. My first point is this, right? He says that anything that leads to human flourishing is good. Now, there's a few assumptions here and there's a few problems here. Now, why does he think it's all about human flourishing? What leads him to believe this? Number one. Number two, how can he say whatever leads to human flourishing is good? I mean, on naturalism, from Sam Harris's own naturalistic worldview, as we've seen, it's all about survival and reproduction. He is an accidental byproduct of a lengthy evolutionary process, and his moral values have evolved just like his fingers, hands, and teeth have. If this is the case, it's all about selfishness. It should be about my survival and reproduction. It's not about human flourishing. Secondly, he says that anything that leads to human flourishing is good. Now let's take a rapist and put him in this example, right? A rapist flourishes when he rapes. So does that mean rape is good? Well, according to Sam Harris's landscape, it is good. And this is a huge problem. I mean, let's go further, right? This is enough to refute his entire landscape, right? But let's go further and let's look into this. Now, he says when he speaks about good, he's not really speaking of good in any ethical way, in any moral way. I mean, you can use the term good in many ways. For example, it's good that the sun was out. Or you can say it's good you're wearing a blue top today. Or you can say it's good to know you. Or see, all of these are examples of using good with that in a non-moral sense. Right? And this is, I believe, what Sam Harris is doing. And he's just playing with words. It's intellectual gymnastics, basically. Well, I wouldn't even say it's intellectual. It's just gymnastics, right? And what he's doing, and then what he goes on to do or suggest is that science can tell us what good is. Now, here's what's very interesting. Yes, science can tell us what good is if good is defined as Sam Harris defines it, right? And that is anything that leads to human flourishing. In other words, what he's saying is science can tell us what leads to human flourishing. And I would agree, science can probably do that, just like science can tell us what leads to the flourishing of an apple tree or what leads to the flourishing of an olive tree, right? So this is not about objective moral values and truths. This is just about, something that's observable. And in his book, he clearly, states that it's almost unanimous among scientists and philosophers that science can tell us what is, not what ought to be, right? And let me just give you an example, and this example clarifies this very, very clearly. I mean, it's crude, but it makes the point, right? Now, just imagine for a second there's a child molester who manages to get a child into a room, right? Now, pause there for a second. Let's bring Sam Harris's moral landscape to the rescue, if it can rescue anything. But let's look at this for a second. Now, the child molester's flourishing is in molesting the child. The child's flourishing is in escaping and getting away, right? Now, according to Sam Harris's model, anything that leads to human flourishing or the flourishing of sentient beings is good. So if the child molester molests the child and that leads to his flourishing, then that is good. And if the child gets away and it leads to his flourishing, then that is good. But this is where Sam Harris's model goes dead. It goes quiet. It cannot say anything. Because the real question is, who should be allowed to flourish in this situation? Should the molester be allowed to molest the child, or should the child be allowed to escape? Sam Harris's moral landscape cannot give you any idea here. It cannot say anything. And this clearly goes to show that it's not about objective right and wrong, or what objective moral values are, or it makes no claim on that, right? And this completely refutes his landscape, and that's how I'm going to refer to it from here on in, because it's just the landscape. It's not a moral landscape in any way, shape or form. Now, here's the point, right? If we were to, for the sake of argument, just accept for a second that his landscape works and it gives you objective moral values and truths, right? Now, here's the point, right? If we were to take his moral landscape and just accept it, I would argue that it's a very, very dangerous idea. Now, why do I say this? Because his landscape could be used to validate a number of atrocities. It could be used to validate pretty much anything that leads to human flourishing. For example, the North American Man Boys Lover Association, NAMBLA, can happily, they will happily accept Sam Harris's moral landscape because they could use it to justify what they would like to do. The moral landscape could easily accommodate these guys. And this is the problem. And, his landscape could not condemn what Hitler did in Nazi Germany with the Jews. So these are huge problems with Sam Harris's landscape. Now, here's what's very interesting, right? And I'm just gonna read this for you quickly. In the concluding pages of his book, basically, what he does is he refutes his own entire book, right? If you like, he destroys his own argument, pretty much. He says that, and yet people could be made equally happy by very different moral impulses. Perhaps there is no connection between being good and feeling good, and therefore no connection between moral behavior as generally conceived and subjective well-being. In this case, rapists, liars, and thieves would experience the same depth of happiness as the saints. This scenario stands the greatest chance of being true. This, my friends, is what Sam Harris himself is saying, and this is himself destroying his own argument, basically. So, just to conclude, I'd like to say that the moral argument still stands. If God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. Objective moral values and duties do exist, therefore God exists. Now, Sam Harris has to do one of two things. He has to either accept the truth that God exists, or he has to let go of objective moral values and truths. It's his choice. He can't have his cake and eat it. I thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.